Last time we finished up, we were talking about compound conditions. Just want to review those real quick. Compound conditions, we join them with either the word and or or. If you use the word and, every condition in the pair must be true in order for the end result to be true. If you use or, one condition or both needs to be true for the end result to be true. You can mix though, you can extend that to 2 or 3 or 4 conditions if they're all connected with and. All of them must be true for the end result to be true. Same thing for or, connect them together, get 3 or 4 ors. If one of the conditions is true, the end result is true. Things get a little tricky when you start mixing them. Ands and ors, and has precedence, so this condition gets this condition and this condition get evaluated together first. Then that result, either true or false, is evaluated against a snowy day. In C#, we use an ampersand, double ampersand for and a double vertical bar just above your return key, shifted, for or, and an exclamation mark for not. Remember, the exclamation mark flips the logic, flips the result. If it's true, it makes it false. If it's false, it makes it true. We use that, somebody reminded me in yesterday's class that we use that in your welcome screens to show and hide the email address. If it's visible, set the email address visible property equal to not the email address visible property. Flip it. Don't believe we'll need a whole lot of that, but these are sometimes used to make your conditions a little easier to read. We also talked about short circuit, and I'm going to open up our compound condition app here. And we wrote this short circuit app, or the short circuit component of this. We wrote a little test. Said if that text box is not the empty string, and we parse it and it's greater than 60, okay, then keep processing. But if it's the empty string, we can't parse it. Well, because of short circuiting, if this is false, C# recognizes that I don't need to continue because these are all and conditions. C# recognizes that. And so I don't need to continue, and it does not. It short circuits the condition right there and says, I'm done. I know the answer. It's false. Don't even need to keep going. And it never tries to parse that empty text. This command in some languages would crash because it analyzes this and it analyzes that. If you flip these two around and you put in a blank, it'll crash because it'll try to parse it first. And then check to see if it's the empty string. That won't work. By checking to see if it's an empty string first, it short circuits, and it never tries to parse. If this is false, it is the empty string. It never tries to parse it and simply reports it as a fail. So that's short circuiting. It happens automatically. Most of the time, it's not going to affect you, but the only time it might, you could use some of the author's tips. He says if you're joining two conditions with an and, if you're joining two conditions with an and, put the condition that's least likely to be true first. Because if it comes up false, the answer is already known and we can speed up processing just a smidge. Same thing with an or. If you put the condition most likely to be true first, it'll short circuit the or, because as soon as it finds a true, it quits checking all the rest because it knows the answer is going to be true. You can speed up your processing a little bit by putting that condition first. That's not something I check. Talking billionths of a second here. Thought it was an interesting little tip. But for the programs we write, it's not going to speed them up any because they're already going lightning fast. All right, this is the lab. So that little paragraph you're going to want to read for the lab, I'm going to jump ahead of it. I'm going to do the lab last. And let's talk about generating random numbers. I'll make that a little bit bigger. That's too big. It's better. Okay. All programming languages today allow you to generate random numbers. Without random numbers, it's very difficult for us to create games. Somebody drops a bomb, what's the chances I get killed? Generate a random number. And if the random number is greater than 75, you're dead. If it's greater than 50, you're wounded. If it's less than 50, you'll walk away and keep on fighting. In your math program, we're going to generate random numbers. Let's do some math quizzes. Instead of always letting the user pick the numbers, we pick the numbers and they got to come up with the answers. It's a more appropriate quiz game. I'm playing a game called Words or something like that on my phone right now, and it throws up random letters to try to confuse me. It's almost like Hangman, but it throws up some random letters. How does it pick random letters? Same way, we pick random numbers and then we find the letter that corresponds to it. So randomness is something we use a lot, particularly in game programming. It's not used an awful lot in business programming unless we're trying to do simulations and stuff, and then it might come in. All languages know how to do it. They all do it a little bit differently though. Most languages, when you ask for a new random number, which is what that basically says, when you ask for a new random number, it gives you a number, a double, between 0 and 1. 0.75, 0.13, 0.01, point something. And it is your job, if you don't want a number between 0 and 1, and how often do you, it is your job to manipulate it. In C#, it's a little more friendly. When you ask for a random number like this, actually, this doesn't ask for the random number. This declares a random number generator, if you will. When you ask for a random number, you say ran.next. When you do that, you get a number between not 0 and 1, but 0 and 2,147,483, that's million, excuse me, 183,647. Again, how often do you need a number between 0 and 2 billion? Not too often. So again, it's going to be our job to manipulate that random number to get it in the range that we want. If I'm rolling a dice, I want a number between 1 and 6. If I'm playing cards, I want numbers between 1 and 52. We need to manipulate those numbers. Any random number generator, none of them have the ability for you to say, give me random numbers between here and there. The next parts of my notes talk briefly about how to do that. If you don't want to pay a lot of attention, the part after it says, Volcker Tools includes get random. So this explanation is for those of you that are truly curious. If I want numbers between, in C# now, this is different in other languages. JavaScript, definitely different. PHP is different. If I want numbers between 0 and something else, I can put a number in the parentheses. Remember up here, it was just parentheses. Get me the next random number between 0 and 2 billion. If you want to limit it, then you can put a number in there, like 50. However, when you put 50 in there, it never generates a 50. Those other languages that generate numbers between 0 and 1, they never generate a 1. They will generate a 0, but they never generate a 1. If I put 50 in here, it never generates a 50. It generates random numbers between 0, inclusive, and 50, not inclusive. That's one thing they all have in common. They all do the same thing, that top value. So what I do is just say, well, I want a number between 0 and 51. That way I get my 50. But notice the way I wrote it. 50 is what I really want, plus 1 to override the standard behavior. But what if I want numbers between 50 and 100? Then my first task is to figure out how many numbers are there between there. 50, right? No, 51. If you count the endpoints, there's 51 numbers there. If I said between 0 and 3, are there 3 numbers between there? No, there's 0, 1, 2, and 3. That's 4 numbers. So once again, the plus 1 comes into it. And then I don't want numbers between 0 and 50. I want numbers between 50 and 100. And so I add the 50 back in. I generate a random number between 0 and 50. Add the 50 back in, gives me numbers between 50 and 100. There is also a next double function in C#. I don't generally need random numbers that are doubles. But you could do that. And so let's quit talking about it here. To simplify it, I've given you getRandom. And we'll go take a look at the code for getRandom in just a minute. But here's how you use it. Just like vtools unformat, you say vtools.getRandom, capital G, capital R, and then you give it the minimum value you want, and you give it the maximum value you want, and getRandom returns an integer between 15 and 75 inclusive on both ends. You'll get a 75 every now and then. You get a 15 every now and then, and all the numbers in between. I have written getRandom in just about every language I've ever used. Visual Basic, JavaScript, PHP. I don't like reprocessing it all the time. I don't like thinking about, let's see, how do I got to do this? I got to figure out the range and then add one and then add the minimum back in again. And I don't want to think about it. I write it once, I think about it once, and from then on I just call getRandom. The value of functions. This function returns a value just like unformat did. Unformat returned a string with all the commas and dollar signs and percent signs stripped out. This one returns a number, an integer. So your number over here should be an integer. All that other stuff, the next and the next double and the range, all taken care of in Voker Tools. You don't have to do anything. You want a random number, the only thing you got to do is bring in Voker Tools. Now that I mentioned that, I'm not sure, nope, we don't have Voker Tools in compound conditions, so I'm going to have to bring that in. And unfortunately, I just deleted simple subs, which had it. If you have a simple subs on your desktop, you can steal it from there. In my case, I'm going to have to go up to OneDrive real quick and look around, and there's Voker Tools. Download that to the desktop. And then remember to bring it in here. I simply add an existing item. This button, drop it down. That's new item. This is add an existing item. I always drop it down because I can never remember what the icons mean. So I drop it down, add an existing item, go to my desktop where Voker Tools is hiding. And now it's in. And at this point, here's button pick. I can generate a random number. So I'm going to declare a variable that is of type integer. And then all I have to say is a number equals vtools, getRandom. And let's generate numbers between 1, so I don't get any zeros, and 100. And finally, just move that into the label. And I have to two-string it. I'm not formatting it because I'm generating numbers between 1 and 100. There's no commas, no dollar signs, no periods, so no reason to really format it, but I do have to convert it to a string. So generating a random number in my classes is easy. If you're not in my class and you're stuck using some other language that you've never seen before, that I've never seen before, you should be able to take the code that I have written, manipulate it into your language, and write a getRandom of your own. I can't imagine any of your programs in the future not having Voker Tools because unformat gets used a lot. This gets used a lot. Next semester we'll have key press events that get used all the time for validation that are all included in Voker Tools. Might as well bring it in, make it standard. There is no way that I know of to say start a new project and while you're at it, go get Voker Tools and suck that in. You could create a generic project called Rachel's Work. And then every time you want to make a new copy or a new project, copy Rachel's work over. It's already got Voker Tools in it. And then you go through and change all the form names and everything. You could do something like that. But bringing Voker Tools in is pretty easy. Just go find an existing copy from your Unit 4 programs And notice it's still on my desktop out here. When I brought it into my project, it made a copy of it. When you add an existing item, it always makes a copy, leaves the original alone. So you could go into your Unit 4 math program, grab Volcker tools from that and put it in your Unit 5 math program. And they're both still intact. So here's my random number. I just click and I get an 18 and I get a 67 and so on. And if I end my program, it better not start at 18 again. Technically, these are pseudo-random number generators, random numbers. They're not exactly random because they are generated by a mathematical process. It's a complex mathematical process. It's about as random as we can make it, and for our purposes, when we're playing games with them, they're fine. Okay. There I got lucky and got a 1. If I keep going, 100 should show up there sometime. If I really want to test to make sure it works, let's not give it such a big range, give it 10s. There it was. So 1s and 10s both showing up. Questions about random numbers? Yes, ma'am. Where did I put it? Oh, I put that in the button pick click event. Okay, so it's just in here. But where you put it? Okay, it depends on when do you want to generate a new number? Okay, and this one I just chose this button and double clicked it. Or actually, the event was already there and put some code in. Let's take a quick look at Volcker tools. There's get random. Notice it's not a real complicated method. It's 1 line long. It generates the next random number. We saw that. Take the max minus the min plus 1. That's the range. 0 to 3, there's 4 numbers. 3 minus 0 is 3 plus 1 is 4 numbers. And then when you're done, add the minimum back in again. So if you're generating numbers between 10 and 20, this generates a random number between 0 and 10 or 11. And this adds the 10 back in again. That's the basic premise behind these things. If you've got another language like JavaScript that generates numbers between 0 and 1, you have to multiply it by 100 in there someplace. Just take that number with decimal places, multiply it by 100, round it to 2 decimal places, or just convert it to an integer. It's not hard, but remembering this every single time is just a pain. So I write the function, and you get to use it. Questions? Okay, this last one here we've already done real quick, so let's just take a quick look at it. I'm going to double click on check status, and it says in here, if the text name contains any form of Volcker, then show instructor, otherwise show student. Normally we'd say something like this, if text name dot text double equals Volcker, parentheses, curly bracket, then LBL status dot text equals instructor, else student. If I run that and type in Volcker all caps, I'm going to get student. The only time I get instructor is when I capitalize that exactly right. But often we want to give our users a little more leeway. We've already seen this. We did it in our talk to the animals thing. We can say either ToUpper, parentheses. If I do that, then these have to be all caps. Or I can say, and this is kind of the one I prefer, so I'm not getting the yelling here, but it really doesn't make any difference. to lower, and then this has to be all lowercase. Can mix it up however the heck I want, and it recognizes me. So that's ToUpper and ToLower. Those come in very handy for case insensitive comparison, because whenever you do if statements comparing strings, they're always case sensitive. I will save this on OneDrive so that you have those 2 sample codes. Just a little bit more in the notes. Just talked about ToUpper and ToLower. You don't have to do it in the middle of an if statement. Here I'm saying take whatever's in this variable, to uppercase it, and put it in that variable. Take this text box, lowercase it, put it in that variable. Or, like we just did, put it all into an if statement while you're comparing. All kinds of stuff you can do with these if you want to change stuff. I often will do this ToUpper to a state code somebody enters. I ask them to type it in a box. They type it lowercase, I uppercase it. Don't use this one quite as much except for these comparisons, because how often do you want to take text that the user types and make it all lowercase? Usually it's the opposite. If we got these complicated part numbers or vehicle identification numbers, VINs, they all have uppercase letters in them. So let the user type them however the heck they want. We do our program does the capitalization magically for them. They do not modify this part right here. Does not change what's in that text box.text permanently. It only makes a copy of it, if you will, that is uppercase. Here I have a variable that has a copy of this all lowercase in it, but the text box text itself does not change. So if you want to actually change what's in the text box, then you have to set it equal to it. Text name dot text equals text name dot text to uppercase or lowercase or whatever you want to do. That will change it. Because now it says take whatever's in the text box, uppercase it, put it right back in the text box again. That's annoying. It's all uppercase. Why would I want it all uppercase? Well, the alternative is ToLower, right? Well, that's one alternative. The other alternative is to use another Voker tool. I have another tool called vProperCase that capitalizes the first letter of every word, except little ones like of and the and in and stuff if they're in the middle of a sentence. But notice this one works backwards. We send the text to it, and it sends us text back out. Don't put it on the end. When we did it before with ToLower, right, that tells you that this is built into the language. A string knows how to do that. A string does not know how to do vProperCase. That's my process. That's my program tool. Oops. Oh, I modified it. If there's capital letters in there, leaves them alone. So if you put everything in all caps, it assumes you want them that way. ands and ofs and ins and ands, the us in the middle. I wrote this to do book titles more than anything else, DVD titles. I type them all lowercase, V proper case capitalizes them properly, and not only that, this is one other reason I wrote it, it's my wife's last name. There's an apostrophe in there, like O'Sullivan. Make sure you're still awake. Thank you. Capitalizes the K. If you do, there are some stuff, there is one version of this built into C#, but it only capitalizes the first letter of every word, period. My version's a little smarter. It recognizes that. Occasionally it's stupid though. I'm working on a Macintosh computer and it wants to capitalize the I because it's after Mac, like in MacDonald. So in that case, it's kind of stupid, but if we need it, I can tweak it. So that's V proper case built in. I'll leave that in the code. Built into vtools. You need to bring the vtools in to use it. Finally, concept of a flag. A flag, and this is a typo, does it show up like that in your printed notes with the box all screwy like that? Nobody's got notes open. Doesn't matter. I fixed it and haven't put it on the website yet. Flags are simply variables that contain booleans. The book talks about them in this chapter, so I mention them briefly in my notes. You'll see some more examples. Look in the book. And there's even some checkoff questions that you could check out. But flags are Boolean variables. They somehow get a true or false put into them. They are typically used if you have very complex validation type logic. If this is wrong, or that is wrong, or this is wrong, or that is wrong, then it's an error. We create a flag to say it's an error. I picture them as tip-ups. Ice fishing's coming, right? Don't do it yet, but it's coming. In an ice fishing, the fishermen put a little thing on their hole, and when the fish bites, the flag pops up. That's how I picture these flags. They start off usually as false, and then if some condition occurs, the user makes a mistake of one of 20 different kinds, bing, the flag goes up. And if, as long as there's a mistake, then we yell at them with an error message. That's what this used to say before the box got all mangled. If an error exists, then don't process, but give them an error message. It's the kind of technique we're going to be using next semester to do validation. You can use a flag. Just like when we said check radio button dot checked, we didn't have to say double equals true because it's already a Boolean property. Same thing here. When you're using Boolean variables, you don't compare them to true because they're already Boolean. It's redundant. When I name them, I use a BLN prefix, or I'm starting to get into the habit of an is prefix. So a lot of more seasoned programmers than I use is because if you read that, it looks right. If is retired, then do whatever you're supposed to do. Versus if Boolean retired, do what you're supposed to do. Think about that one a little harder. So a lot of people, when they make flag variables, I'm not sure you're going to need one. Just want to introduce you to the concept of flags, and we'll start sticking them into the code probably next semester when we need them. I'm trying to name them with is now if I remember, instead of BLN as a prefix. I like to put something at the beginning because Boolean variables need to be a little more recognizable than the other ones. Their type needs to be a little more obvious. So I put is in there. All right, last thing for you to do in this unit. Two things to do. Let's start by going to Blackboard. I'm done lecturing, so that means you must have work to do. You have two programs and a worksheet in this unit. Let's take a quick look at those. Maybe. I'm going to Blackboard. I'm not there yet. Okay, here's Unit 5. There's a worksheet. You're going to finish the tooltips lab today. When that's done, all the labs are done. And then you get to pick one of these two, either Belts Ice Cream or Rent-A-Wreck. And there are skeleton programs here. Starters. So you don't have to start from scratch. I've already given you the project. It probably already has a nice picture in it for Rent-A-Wreck and a lovely picture for Belts. About 50% of you are going to forget that and you're going to start from scratch. That's perfectly acceptable. It's going to take you twice as long because you got to lay out the form and find your own picture and do all the other stuff that I did. There's probably already an end exit. There's probably already an end button or an exit button routine coded with descriptions and who knows what else. So my advice, download the starter and pick whichever one of these suits you. Then everybody's got to do the enhanced math program. Again, I don't care if you do them in order. You can do enhanced math first if you wish. This is significantly more difficult, I think. These two are very similar to what we just did with simple subs. Instead of subs, you're doing ice cream or renting a car with extra features in it. This is going to test your ability to come up with the yes, no, switched, if, else if logic to create a math program that is more a quiz type game than the one we generated last time. So those are the 3 assignments: worksheet, one of these, and the math program. When do you want to do the worksheet by? Monday's a little rough on my Thursday, Friday classes that aren't done yet. Tuesday, we'll give them a break. We'll do it on Tuesday.
It'll be your Christmas present.
Next week, what? Next week, Thursday, like the 20th? Get a week. Suits me.
What's the big deal? You can do it.
Could always submit it early.
You seem like you're making a big deal of it.
Okay, here we go. Don't get into an argument here. That's the last thing I want. Or I'll pick the dates if you guys can't behave. Okay, I'm going to set a warm-up. I'm going to set a due date on the warm-up. All right, as the first one, but you can do them in the other order if you wish, just like we did with Unit 4. This one should be relatively simple, This is Thanksgiving. How about the 26th? That sounds good to me. And if you're driving that day because you're going to grandmother's house through the woods and over the river, whatever it is, then get it done early.
Over the river.
That's what I said, wasn't it? Okay. Then finally, the math program, enhanced math. This one's a little more complicated. If those of you who like to start these the day of, I'll recommend it on this one, folks. I recommend you build this one in phases. Get it to do stuff. Congratulations, take a couple days off. Get it to do stuff, take a couple days off. If you're trying to crank this out in 1 or even 2 days, you're going to regret it. I'm warning you now. It's called NQA card. I would propose, that's Thanksgiving here, so that's December. Oh my goodness. 5th?
Sure.
The last bunch of programs have all been due on Friday, right? Oh, Monday. That work good? Rather have a weekend?
I really don't care.
I really don't care.
You decide.
Okay, we'll push it to Monday. But again, that's the 8th. That's 1 week from the end of the semester, and you got 2 more programs and another worksheet due. Everything else that's coming up in class, I can go set the due date right now, and I will, because everything else is due. I believe we still have class on the 18th. I got to check. It's either the 17th or whatever the last day of class is. I don't care what section you're in. That's the last day. And pay attention. There's a final. What usually happens for the final is somewhere around here, I'll start offering it. You can take it whenever you want. You want to take it on the very last day? You can. You want to take it on the very first day, get it over with, and you could almost have this last week off. If all your assignments and all your updates and your finals done, you could be working and sweating on all your networking stuff that week instead of worrying about this class. But I just got to find the last day of the semester. It's either the 17th or the 18th. That's when all your Unit 6 stuff is due. It's also when your final is due. And here's another one you haven't heard before. Somewhere around the 8th of December. Maybe the 10th. Anything you turn in after the 10th is final. Meaning I'm not offering you any updates anymore. I know what's going to happen. There's still 60 plus of you. You're going to bury me. You're going to submit something on the 10th. You may get it back by the 15th. That doesn't give you a lot of time to do updates. Anything that comes in after that, there's just not enough time. So if you want a shot at an update for your last Unit 6 assignment tracker program, get it in on the 10th or before, and I guarantee you, I'll get it back to you in time for an update. But after that, I can't do it. Doesn't mean you can't continue to submit updates. It just means I won't be offering more update points at that point. You can still submit updates from your welcome screen on the 18th of December if you want to. I'll roll my eyes, but I'll grade it. Updates, there's no due date till the end of the semester. Questions about any of that? I will repeat all that Unit 6 stuff later. Just giving you advanced warning because we just set a due date in December, for heaven's sakes. That means the semester is drawing to a close. What class is this? Wednesday. Monday will be a lab all day for you to work on your Unit 5, whatever you're working on. Wednesday, I'm going to start Unit 6. 2 hours of lecture, hour of lab like always. But Wednesday next week, I start Unit 6. I'm feeling a little more comfortable. That's why I'm giving you a lab day on Monday to work on this stuff. Feeling a little more comfortable because we're starting in middle November on Unit 6. If I can get it done by the first week of December, that gives you about 2 weeks with no more lecture to get the last assignments done. I think that's a good way to go. That's what I'm shooting for. When you get to Thanksgiving, rest your brains. That Unit 6 stuff, actually, you can't wait that long. The Unit 6 stuff gets complex. This is hard, right? Ifs and logic, putting it together. Now we put loops in it. Oh my goodness. If it's not hard, don't tell anybody. Or offer to help them. Because for some people, this gets real hard when we get to loops. Questions? All right, then you want to go to OneDrive just in time. You want to go to the labs folder, Unit 5, and if you wish, you can download, this is probably the easiest way to do it, download the Tooltips Starter. That is simply Simple Subs done from last year, but it ought to look very similar to this year. And then here's the instructions for the Tooltips lab. You have what's left today to finish that, and the rest of the time is lab. I have to leave at 6 o'clock for a meeting that somebody's scheduled on top of this class. Not me. But I'm going to leave at 6, but Paul is gratefully, I'll say that, gratefully accepted to stay and help you with any issues you have. If you're not done with the lab yet, he'll be here to check you off. One more time. Questions? Go to it.